motherfucker. Abend is going to talk about really cool magstripe stuff. Yeah, and he has giveaways too. So if you're interactive and/or
readers for good questions, secrets of the super hacksaw for the dumbest question ever. So don't be afraid to ask anything.
So, like we say, you have Shmooballs, which can get his attention, which might just be, give me free stuff, bitch. Or you can ask questions and he'll hook you up. Round of applause for Ben.
Hello, as introduced, I'm Abend, and I'm going to be presenting on magnetic cards, how to read them, how to emulate them if you don't actually have the card legitimately, and some experimental work that I'm doing on how to make your own for cheap. Let's see here. I'm also going to be, my slides that I sent to the Shmoocon crew are slightly outdated because I was obviously working on this up until the 11th hour. And the slides and the code will all be put up at that address /magcards. The only thing that's there right now is me complaining about pictures of werewolves having sex with Linksys routers. So that's its own thing. So it's my presentation. This picture is actually from a presentation I gave at Worcester Polytechnic Institute on how bad their specific MagCard system was. Yes, thank you, Frank, one of the people who was at that presentation. Those wires are in a cable run that anybody who attends the school can get to, and they carry magnetic card data that, when I did that presentation, consisted of people's social security numbers in plain text, to the best of my knowledge. So it's, very convenient for everyone concerned. All right. This ties into Bruce's, just because I'm up here, don't believe me. I am a crackpot, and I'm here to talk about bullshit. So if you sit still for the next hour, I'll fill your minds with lies. So, overview, like any teacher, I'm going to try the tell you what I'm going to tell you, and then tell you what I told you. I'm going to cover the basics of magnetic cards, how the media works, how the data is encoded on them, how to read them with these readers, which cost a mere $3 in surplus, so if you don't get one here for free, you can pick one up on the internet for dirt cheap. How to emulate cards, which is basically making a computer and some special hardware that's very easy to build act like a card. It'll fool a reader, and I'll actually demonstrate that, hopefully. And as you can see, I'm logged in as root on both of these boxes, but they're not worked, so good luck pwning them. And then how to make your own cards, which is a little experimental, by which I mean I haven't actually done it yet. But I have some of the hardware here. The basic magnetic media is just very small particles of magnetic material suspended in a plastic binder. It's exactly the same as the stuff that you'd see in VCR tapes, audio tapes, floppy drives, VCR tapes, etc. I'm not sure exactly what the chemical formula is. I think barium ferrite is commonly used for cheaper stuff. The main thing that's important is it comes in two versions. There's high coercivity and low coercivity. Coercivity is a measure of the field strength needed to magnetize the particles. So a high coercivity card needs a very strong field to magnetize it. They're mostly used in applications where the card will be exposed to hostile magnetic fields like, well, I'm not going to claim that they can resist an MRI machine, but perhaps in a hospital. The low coercivity cards are more frequently used if the card needs to be rewritten frequently. Any reader can read either type of card, but if you want to write high coercivity cards, you need a writer that can muster that kind of oomph. The data is encoded as flux transitions on the card, which is basically the edges of magnets, or of magnetic areas in the stripe, which are written on the card using electromagnets. The basic design of the electromagnets is like this, where's my pointer? The round thing at the bottom. It's called a solenoid, and it's basically a round piece of ferromagnetic material with a very small slit in it, and then a coil wrapped around it. If you run current through the coil one way, then one end of the C shape there becomes the north pole of the magnet, and the other end becomes the south pole. If you flip the current direction, you flip which pole is which. If you're dragging this thing along a magnetic stripe, I'm going to really need that pointer in a minute. Sadness. Then, if you drag it from one end of the card to the other, you end up with a blank card. Can anybody read that at all? Right. Those are a whole bunch of little brackets with N and S written in them. Basically, each one represents a magnetic particle. You're not going to get this kind of resolution with a normal solenoid, but essentially it shows the entire card. Every single particle is magnetized and with its magnetization oriented in the same direction, which means that all the fields merge and the card basically becomes a very weak bar magnet with a north pole at one end and a south pole at the other end. That encodes no data. If you switch the direction that the current is flowing through the solenoid, then you switch the magnetization and you switch the magnetization of the card that it's moving over. So essentially you end up breaking the bar magnet at that point and ending up with two magnets with their north poles forced together in the middle of the stripe. At that point, if you bring a solenoid across it without any voltage on it, it will create a voltage spike as the magnetic field moves past the coil at the point where the flux transition was. The layout of the flux transitions, the data is encoded in them with Aiken biphase. I have a better picture to demonstrate this, but basically the track is divided into bit cells, and there's one of these transitions at the edge of every cell. And the cells are all of constant width. If there's a transition in the middle of one of the cells, then that's a 1 bit. If there's no transition, it's a 0 bit. And this is something that I stole out of other people's PDFs because I can't draw. Each bump in that line corresponds to a flux transition on the card, somewhere where basically it went from being north-south, north-south to south-north, south-north on the polarization of the particles. An advantage of this kind of layout is that it's self-clocking. If you have a bit cell is always a constant width, so no matter how fast you swipe the card, the bit cells are always one width, and a bit cell with a 1 in it is always, transition half that width, transition half the width, and the final and the closing transition. That means if you have a whole bunch of zeros at the beginning of your card, when you swipe the card, you'll get a constant frequency signal, which you can synchronize your reader to, and then you'll know whether the next clocking bits are zeros or ones. And every magnetic card that obeys this standard has those clocking zeros on both ends of the data so that you can swipe the card either way and have it synchronized properly. The data is odd parity. The byte length varies depending on the track. The first track, there are 3 tracks defined in the standard. I'll get to them in a minute, but the first track is 7 bits with an odd parity bit, and the other 2 tracks are 5 bits. So these are obviously very restricted data sets. It's written least significant bit first, so you see the 1's bit, the 2's bit, the 4's bit, the 8's bit, and then a parity bit. And the data is just done in a lookup table to do the translation. I have, at the end of the slide in my sources, where you can find PDFs of the lookup tables, how to write interface stuff, that sort of thing. The data layout within a track is, like I said, the clocking zeros. Then there's a start sentinel, which is 1 character designated by a standard to mean this is the beginning of the data. The actual data and field separators, which are bytes designated to separate fields. So you can have, for example, a account number and then a separator and person's name or whatever. And then an end sentinel indicating the end of the data. The LRC is a longitudinal redundancy check, which is used for yet another error check in addition to the parity bits, and then more clocking zeros so the card could be read back the other way. The LRC is dead simple to calculate. It's an XOR of all the data bits, and then it has its own parity bit. I was trying to do the math in my head earlier, and I think that it requires 4 coordinated bit errors to turn one valid card into another valid card. You'd have to lose 1 bit in the data, that bit's parity bit, the bit in the LRC that corresponds to that column, and the parity bit for the LRC, which would be quite a coincidence. It's phenomenally unlikely that you will swipe your credit card and it will suddenly morph into somebody else's valid credit card. Yeah, there are 3 tracks defined in the ISO standard for this. It's, I believe, standard 7811, and then there's a whole bunch of sub-standards in that series defining things like where the embossing on the card is, how big the card is, how rounded the corners are, how much stress it can take, all this crazy stuff that you'd expect from an ISO standard. They're each 1/10 of an inch wide and start a little over 2/10 from the edge of the card. The only thing that defines the tracks is the standard. The data, the media itself is completely homogeneous. You could have one huge track if you wanted to, and nobody would notice. Track 1 is I'm not going to say the highest information density, but it's the only one that has any alphanumeric character or any alphabetical characters in it. It's usually used on credit cards to encode the name of the card holder, usually the account number, expiration date, that sort of thing. It is one of the higher bit density tracks. Track 2 is the most commonly used. It's unfortunately only numeric data. Well, it makes it easier to read, but you have some limited expressiveness there. Only 40 characters in the track, and usually it's, on credit cards anyway, it's just track 1 without the cardholder's name. So it's still got their credit card number and the expiration date. Everything you need to commit credit card fraud on the internet. Track 3 is the redheaded stepchild of the standard. It's not actually used very often, but it has a lot of characters, and usually the standard specifies that it can be used for some security and PIN verification information. I think airline tickets use it. Other than that, you don't see it a lot in cards, and you don't see it a lot in card readers either. They're the rarest kind of readers. There are numerous possible other formats. There are infrared cards, which look like a blank white piece of plastic, but actually have infrared transparent windows in them. So you can shine infrared light on it, and then with photodetectors pick up the locations of the bits. So it looks like a hole punch card to an infrared reader. There are other magnetic methods. There's no reason to say that you have to obey the standard and put down clocking zeros and an LRC and a start sentinel and all that stuff. You could always just make up your own standard. I actually have an example of that, and I'll be showing it. There's RFID, and unless you've been living in a fallout shelter for the last, 2 years or so, you've heard all the potential problems with RFID. There were some guys at DEF CON who demonstrated they could read them from 60 feet away, I think, which is really bad if it's sending your credit card information when it gets read. There's also the fact that it's the number of the beast. There are religious nutters out there claiming that this is the number of the beast without which you won't be able to conduct commerce. They also used to say that about 1D and 2D barcodes, which are just the black and white squiggles that you see on the back of some driver's licenses, UPC codes, that sort of thing, but are largely overlooked as being satanic these days. There's also smart cards, of which I have one here. They're the ones with the little gold contacts on them. This one's been modified. This is my first attempt at building a card emulator. And these are really smart. They've got programmable sections on them. They can run programs. They can do crypto. They have EEPROMs. Despite all of that, people are still regularly pwning them left and right. There was one clever hack I heard of where they were monitoring its current consumption so that when it tried to erase itself after detecting a whole bunch of invalid password attempts, they could turn it off and then turn it back on and it would forget about all that. Those are gaining in popularity in America, but I think they're mostly popular in Europe, where they use them for all sorts of bank cards, transit cards, that sort of thing. This is a weird format that I found this is a Circus Hotel door card. This isn't the normal ISO standard tracks. There's no clocking zeros, there's no LRC and whatnot, but this is another self-clocking format. If you look at it, one track is the complement of the other, so the XOR of the two tracks would be the clock signal, and then one of those is going to be the ones bits, and of course the other will be the bits that aren't ones, the zeros bits. Unfortunately, I don't know what room this was, so I can't go, oh no, all Circus does is put the room number on the card and then you can open it. But if anybody has any cards, I'm always glad to increase my data set. This is even more cards. And I got these pictures by dusting iron filings onto cards and then sticking them on sticky tape and photographing them really close up. The top one is a one-use Metro card. There's my laser pointer. I can actually point at things. There's the normal data, and then over here it just kind of degrades into nonsense. This data was written at a different clock rate, and if you look really closely at the sticky tape, which I actually have here, so if anybody wants to look at it after the presentation, they're welcome to, you can see on like the bottom and top edges where the real data track is actually wider than clobber data track. And the reason for this is that it invalidates the card. The reader would lose synchronization at that point and go, bad read. That's how they invalidate them, and that's why the one-use MetroCard folding trick worked. There was a time when you could take a one-use MetroCard, fold it at a specific location, and it would basically end the card right there. So you'd swipe the card, and it would, read all of this, and then blast its clobber data into empty space because the card had been shortened, and then you could fold it and use it again. Apparently, they now expire after 24 hours, and I haven't been trying to do anything about it because I don't live in New York. That one is a magnetic card from the Horton Grand Hotel. How many people went to TourCon? Well, all three of you. It's like, that was one of the TourCon hotels. And hotel cards, this one I believe is the standard, but I haven't squinted at it through a magnifying glass for long enough to actually read it. It uses very, very small bit spacing because it's only got about an inch of stripe that it can use because you stick the card in, but you don't swipe it all the way through. So that much of it goes into the reader, and that's all the data space they have. This one here is the New York Metro card. Again, this one shows evidence of rewriting, and you can actually see it on this one because this area and that area are considerably higher than this track, and at the very bottom, you can see the old data that used to be on there. I don't know if this is because it was recycled or because the writer actually overwrites it as you swipe it, because I just found this laying on the track. And then there's this other thing here. A couple of people, I want to say Cephale, or I may be horribly butchering his handle, did a lot of work on the New York Metro cards and basically wrote up the entire system for 2600 a couple issues ago, which is interesting stuff, highly recommended. On every swipe? Oh. Encrypted. Clever. For anybody who didn't catch that, and possibly for the video, Jen's contribution was that it does rewrite on the New York Metro card does rewrite on every stripe and is encrypted information. I also have a Chicago Transit card here, which is exactly the same shape as a Metro card, has exactly the same stripe location, and even has the hole in it in the same place. I'm beginning to think it might use a similar data layout.
Have you compared that to the DC Metro card?
I don't have a DC Metro card. And I don't have any iron filings, I'm afraid, so I can't image it right up in front of everybody.
For like $2, you can grab one from that card thing.
Oh, this is true. I do have the temporary card. So.
Yeah, I mean, they're all disposable.
All right.
Deal with the whole thing. So.
All right. Well, come to Interzone. I'll try to present there too and see if we have that there. Reading the cards, at least the standard ones, is dead simple because there's a standard, so everybody makes their own readers that are all drop-in compatible with each other. They're cheap. These were, I believe, $3 each from bgmicro.com, so you can pick up your own or ask questions. Actually, you want one of these? Come on up. Come on down. Yep. They're very simple to read. Writers, on the other hand, are a little more expensive. I've had people come up and say that you could actually pick them up for 45 euros. If so, that's a fantastic deal. Most of the ones I've seen, people were quoting prices in the range of $200 to $2,000, which is great if you're in, like, I don't know, some sort of collective, like a fraternity, a bunch of hackers living together, and you can amortize the cost. It's a little bit much for me to swallow in one bite, so I'm trying to figure out a way to do it cheaper. 150? From when? So you've actually gotten one and they do send them to you, and okay, that's cool. Talk to me after this. I want to see that. I'm talking more along the lines of $5 cheap, though. 150 is still a good deal, but like if you can ghetto something for $5, then hey. The reader interface is dead simple. It has power and ground, which is 5 volts DC for these readers. And then there's 3 more wires that are the signal coming out. Card present is, how many people are familiar with the high and low parlance of describing logic signals? Oh, okay. High means the wire has 5 volts coming out of it. Low means it's ground, so 0 volts. The card present line starts out high, drops low after several of the clocking zeros. The standard mandates that there are at least 20, so any chip will have to synchronize within seeing 20 clocking zeros and start outputting data. Then it goes high after the card goes away, like a couple millisecond delay. The data line pulses regularly, and the clock line the clock line pulses regularly. The data line pulses in time with the actual data. So when the clock is low, you read they're active low, which means a 0 voltage indicates a 1. A high voltage indicates a logical 0. So clock line drops, you read the data line, and then output whatever you just got, 0 or 1 to the screen. It's very easy, and I have code which will be available after the con, or you could get something like this.
So you actually get the zeros and ones out of it, you don't get an NRZI format or anything like that?
NRZI?
Non-return zero inverted, like automatically, where it's the change from 1 to 0
Right.
represents 1.
Yeah. Yeah, you actually get the ones and zeros of the data. This is a sort of a schematic drawing of my readers. I have one of these that's hooked up to the parallel port of this laptop and hasn't burned it up yet, so chances are it's relatively safe. I'm just leeching power from the keyboard connector and then hook the other 3 lines up to the first 3 data bits of the parallel port. I've since learned that it would probably have been better to use the bits of the parallel port that are actually supposed to be inputs instead of just counting on my port being bidirectional, but it works for me. I may have the wires backwards in this drawing, but I don't think so. I believe it's all square. If you don't want to do the whole digital reading thing, you can do analog reading, which I did with this. This used to be one of those point-of-sale readers until it displeased me greatly and I gutted it. It now contains a set of batteries and the electronics from a tape player, like a Walkman type thing. And it turns audio, or the magnetic card signal, into audio. This is mostly useful if you have a card that you don't understand the standard for, or isn't compliant with the magnetic card standards. So I'm going to just play a Barnes & Noble gift card through here. I hope everybody will be able to hear this. I can also mic it, but it'll sound like a beeping noise. You get the idea. That in and of itself isn't terribly useful. It's like, oh joy, beeping, it's got data on track 2. However, if you drop it into something like, any audio recording program, I was trying to come up with the name of Audacity, you can actually just get a graph of the output of the head. So you'll see the actual flux transitions. That's the non-return to 0 output, which requires a little more brain work to read, but it also means if that card wasn't standard and I tried putting it through one of the readers that is standard, it wouldn't read it. It would either not have the clocking zeros or it wouldn't have the data represented the right way, and the reader would just go meh and send me bogus data, possibly not even the same bogus data every time. There are a couple of programs that use that method. Decode Aiken Biphase, which I believe was written by, I'm going to get my attributions wrong, I think it was written by somebody named Redbird. That also was in 2600 and was used sound file. There's also a couple of old DOS programs that do that. Some of them are a little dubious in terms of stability, but the state of the art is advancing as we speak. Emulating would be getting a computer to imitate a card, which is nowhere near as hard as it sounds. I've got an emulator right here, this piece of black box electronics with a little 1/8-inch jack on the end of it. It basically works by electromagnetic reciprocity. A moving card is a varying magnetic field which creates a varying voltage. A varying voltage can create a varying magnetic field. So you can imitate the magnetic field of a card by having a electromagnet like this one and flipping the current direction through it. The tab on the end there is the part that actually goes into the reader, and that becomes either the north or south pole of the magnet depending on which way current is flowing through the coil. It's here. Yeah. It's a schematic diagram of the emulator. If anybody can't read schematics, this is a fairly simple construction project. Those are inverting buffers, which I use to protect my parallel port in case I screw up downwind from them. The rest of the circuit, the 4 resistors and the transistors, forms an H-bridge, which is basically a circuit that allows you to control current flow like bidirectionally. It's usually used for doing things like reversing DC motors. If I put a 1 on this one and a 0 on that one, then I think it's this transistor and that one turn on, and current flows down there through my coil in that direction, and then to ground. If I put a 1 on this one and a 0 on that one, then you get the flow the other way. And conveniently, if I put 1s on both of them, no current goes anywhere, or 0s on both of them, no current goes anywhere, which is useful because some designs, if you put 1s on both of them, the current flows directly to ground, the whole device catches fire, and you look like a fool in front of a large crowd. Yep. I'm going to actually demonstrate that. Hopefully not. One can always hope, I suppose, if one is malicious. Okay, hang on, let me put this thing down. Take me a couple of tries to get right, as it's rather sensitive to where the actual piece of metal is positioned. But whoa, got it in one. So the program basically, can anybody hear me without a megawatt of amplification? No, he's getting one. That's but the general idea is that the program has a sequence of 1s and 0s that I'll recognize that comes up on the screen. That is what I'm supposed to get. Like I said, it's sensitive to position. The string that I'm playing out starts out clocking 0s, then it just goes 1, 0, 1, 1, 0, 0, 1, 1, 1, just because it's very recognizable. And then more clocking 0s in case I were to play it backwards or something. But that just demonstrates that I can make this do whatever I want given a magnetic card here. So if I have somebody's magnetic card data, or I've generated likely looking data, then I can play it out, put it in there. This doesn't guard against, for example, this being hooked up to a system downstream that says, oh, you've tried 600 bogus cards in the last minute and a half. I don't think you're legit. Locked. But, well, c'est la vie. This is my first attempt at building the thing. This is a Kinko's copy card that's been modified slightly. I punched a hole in it and then wound a coil in it. You can see the coil is the little red thing right there. This doesn't work because the coil is donut-shaped, so the magnetic field was entirely the wrong shape to stimulate the reader. There was actually somebody posted on hackaday.com recently, which is a pretty fun website, worth watching, an emulator schematic that was built in, had the head built into the card like this. I'm not saying it's impossible, but I couldn't get it to work for me. This worked because I'm using a massive, like relatively massive anyway, coil to make a fairly large magnetic field. I pulled the coil out of the steering electronics of the remote control toy car, which is why my first slide says, you know, use your toys to break things. But if you're a more patient man than me, you could obviously just wind a coil by hand. Duplicating cards is, I think, maybe only marginally trickier. I've got a tape deck here, like Walkman-style portable recorder, which says ist gehacked, does not play tapes, headphone jack goes directly to tape head, so that I don't accidentally break stuff by trying to play tapes in it. It does actually have, I just opened it up, took the headphone jack, and wired it directly to the head, so now I can drive the headphone jack. What to drive it with? Well, the same emulator, probably. I haven't actually tried this yet, though, so I definitely encourage you to try this at home. If your house burns down, I was never here. But if I get the timing right, I should be able to control that magnetic head to create flux reversals on the card, and then take the piece of tape out of the tape cassette, snip it off, double-side tape it to, I don't know, the back of my credit card or something, and then swipe that through a reader. This is largely useful because if you try to hook your laptop parallel port cable, big black scary box, various stuff up to a point-of-sale terminal, people are going to freak the hell out. They do anyway when they find out you're reading magnetic cards, because I went to a school that went over to magnetic card locks, and basically I asked a few people questions about how the lock system worked, and then I get an email from the police going, "Hi, we'd like to have a word." It's like, oh, they don't like that, do they? No, I guess not. But basically they were just making sure that I wasn't evil, which I'm not, really, I swear. So there's the, yeah, use a tape recorder? Why, yes. I just actually had suggested to me by that gentleman. Would you like a reader? Or you probably already have a bunch, don't you?
I have a bunch.
Yeah, that I actually use a wider tape, which is a concern that I'm going to have to evaluate because the tracks on cassette tapes are much smaller than the tracks on magnetic cards. I'm already using mono to get 2 tracks instead of 4 tracks on the one tape, but it may still be too narrow. If I get a wider track, it just lets me be more sloppy about where I put the data.
If you were to use like a reel-to-reel, possibly hard to come by, but like a reel-to-reel 4-track that takes half-inch tape.
Yes, that's what his suggestion was. Use big tape.
Yeah.
And, about, what, was it 6 months ago? Sold a reel-to-reel at the MIT. So, this is the relevance slide, the so what of this talk. And basically, my motivation was that I'm technology-driven, as opposed to, I don't know, ethics-driven. And admittedly, magnetic cards give a false sense of security. They're dead simple to read. I'm giving random people I don't know readers and software to read them. Plus, there's even better software than mine out there, which isn't saying much. Like Acidus's Stripe Snoop, which I believe does database lookups to actually tell you what kind of card you're looking at and analysis like that. But really, anybody can get into this. I mean, that circuit that I showed, that'd probably cost you a whole $5 at Radio Shack if you don't have the parts already sitting around your room. My parents asked me what the ethical applications of this are, and the only thing I could come up with was consciousness raising about how magnetic cards really aren't safe. I mean, you can do a lot of safety in the back end by having your card just be a database key and then hoping that nobody figures out how your key scheme works. But they don't do any crypto on the card. The card can't react the way smart cards can. So it doesn't take a lot to get at them. And also, you could, in theory, use a system like this for testing readers if you're in the reader construction business. So there's an ethical application for those of you in business. There was a company that was selling a tool designed to do that. They were selling it for $1,000-some, and their website is only available through archive.org, so I don't think that was a valid business model. But, yeah, really, I like playing with this stuff, and I like sharing it with people, telling them how to get stuff to work. If anybody has any questions, feel free to. Yes?
Have you looked at doing any higher resolution stuff so that you can actually get, like, you have data tracks that have been overwritten with the edges? Have you looked like doing some, like,
Basically fringe track analysis for magnetic cards. I thought about doing it with a little magnifying loop and a pointer and going 1 0 0 0 1 0, but that would make me insane.
Probably do that with the iron filing and the
Well, yeah. Oh, OCR. Now that's an interesting idea. Anybody good with OCR? But yeah, it's definitely doable. It's just that I haven't done it yet. And some sources for useful information. The MagTech Corporation is in the business of making standards-compliant card readers, card writers, heads for reading cards, that sort of thing. And so they have a vast array of useful information available on the internet because basically they want their stuff to be easy to use. And trust me, it is. Magtech.com is the main source. If any of their PDFs are locked, because I've noticed that they've started hiding some of their PDFs behind a you have to prove you're a vendor kind of arrangement, they're easy to find on the internet. Everybody snarfed them and republished them many, many years ago. A Day in the Life of a Flux Reversal is a good intro text. That was by Count Zero back in the day, as they say. And it's all over the internet. Just search for Count Zero Flux Reversal and you'll find like 4 billion copies of it. And then there's MOSFET's homepage, which you're going to have to get through archive.org because it went away. I have a suspicion that Shay.com is the French answer to GeoCities and takes your page away if you start talking about hacking. Oh, noes. And then finally, Big thank you to, how am I doing for time, by the way? Now that I run out of presentation. Okay, and just thank you to everybody who helped me out with this, was supportive, and thank you to all of you for coming and seeing my stuff. Any questions, I'll stay up here. Yes?
You mentioned writers. What are you looking at in that area? The writer?
So far, tape and cassette tape and double-sided tape. Building a writer out of something like these, I believe you suggested having a maybe just a mechanical feeder, a constant speed motor that would drag the card past the head and then bit-bang the data there. There are some people who were doing writers at the MIT Flea. They were asking, it's kind of funny, they were asking varying prices depending on who was asking them how much their stuff was selling for. They quoted to me $2,000. Maybe they don't want me to have one. They were clocking their data by having optical interrupters on the track, so they could see the card, pass one interrupter, and then measure the time delay to the next one, detect how fast the card is going, and then count on the swipe speed being constant, which actually the readers count on, so it's a pretty good assumption. You can vary the speed because the data is self-clocking. You can vary the speed from swipe to swipe, but you can't vary it within a swipe or you'll lose synchronization and get completely bogus data. I can actually do that. It's like, this is my Barnes & Noble gift card, so if anybody wants to get money off it, too bad. It doesn't have any money on it. And it probably doesn't have any data on it anymore if I've screwed up badly enough.
We know you're legit, because otherwise you put a card in yourself some better laptops.
Yeah, there is that. Oh, I'm swiping it through the wrong device. That explains it. It's like, I know what I'm doing, really. Ah, much better. No, not much better. That's, oh no, there it is. This data is actually, I swiped the card backwards, so if you look at the end of all those zeros down by the root at Darkstar bit, the start sentinel is like the first 5 bits that start with 1101 0 there. Yeah, it's odd parity, so that 0 is its parity bit. And then the end sentinel is that string of all ones up there. And then the LRC is the set of 3 ones and a 0 after it. And then the rest of it's even more clocking zeros. It picks up more clocking zeros at the other end because it's already synchronized. For the first one, it drops a whole bunch of them before it gets synchronized and then starts throwing out data. Anyone else? Oh, yes.
Run across any similar resources for proximity cards? I mean, this is one technology. Is there anything similar for proximity readers for cards?
Prox readers, yes. You can get for about $40 a device that reads RFIDs. It reads some RFIDs. There are numerous RFID types out there. I don't remember the exact name. Somebody demoed one at Shmoocon, but you can just buy them. They're a basic stamp accessory. They output RS-232 serial data. So it's dead simple to build a thing. And they're also very thin, so you just put it in your pocket and just bump up against people in the subway and read everything in their wallet. Not that I'd suggest theft or carding or anything like that. Yep.
Credit card companies just switch all their credit cards to I guess how it works and tracks now.
My company, my credit card people didn't tell me, if so.
Like any new cards being issued or something.
It wouldn't surprise me just because this is like everywhere now and it's... Oh, okay, yeah. Did credit card companies switch to high coercivity cards? I'm not aware of a switch, but it would make sense just because they don't want people... There have been instances of what they're calling skimming, where people have a PDA with something like this hooked up to it, and when the waiter takes your credit card to go ring it up, he swipes it through his own reader, and now he has your credit card. And so if he could write a credit card, then he'd be able to write your data to his card and buy stuff on what looks like his card but is really yours. There's one small issue that it wouldn't really help. It would just raise the bar. A high coercivity reader is just more expensive than a low coercivity reader.
Reader or writer? Because, I mean,
Oh, excuse me, writer.
yeah.
Yes, I misspeak.
You would want it would make sense if they would switch to a high coercivity card anyway, due to the proliferation of the magnetic dealies
Right,
to wipe out the anti-theft thing.
This is true. It would resist those a lot better. And, okay, I'm told I have 10 minutes. Anything else? No, yes.
Talk a little bit about the encryption on the cards.
What encryption?
Some of the cards are encrypted. I mean, the lady back here said that she was thought of the
Yeah, that the Metro card is encrypted.
what is that encrypted in? Is there any attempts to crack that?
It would be a implementer specific thing, so it would vary from card to card. I, in my research, have not found anything talking about that crypto. But Jen, has anybody broken the Metro card yet?
I don't think so, no. I don't
No. Ah, all right. But yeah, basically it would vary from user to user. You'd have to pick one. Did you have a question? All right. And free stuff. I already gave those guys a whole bunch of readers. You. Sorry. Show of hands? Yeah, okay. So make people ask questions is one thing. Oh, way to be tall, dude. Also, if anybody wants to come up with a really, really dumb question. Oh, you want to see my I've got a better idea. How about if I demonstrate the reader again? I'll just need a credit card from someone in the audience. Anyone? Anyone? No, I didn't think so. Yeah, well, I'll throw the book at that guy. Redheaded stepchild? Are you a stepchild? That's one way to find out. Don't throw the book. You might want to come over. It's not going to fly that far. Although I've always wanted to say I threw the book at a Belcore guy. Yes. Oh, now I'm out of free stuff.
About smart cards, I mean, are there different types, or is there kind of a standard for those, or
There are standards for them. There are different types. There are some that are simply EPROMs. They just, you write data to them, read data from them. There are some that have all sorts of file structure. File structure. It's a very primitive file system. There are ones that have crypto on them. There are ones that are one-time key type things. So every time you read them, it's a different piece of information. But there are standards existent. I haven't done a lot of playing around in that arena yet. I have some gear for it, though, so I may take a look at it if I can find a good target. Kinko's.
with those Amex card readers?
MX card reader. The
Amex Blue card, they were giving out free smart card readers. All you got to do is sign up. So I got one and put it in the drawer.
Okay. Interesting. Depends on what you find interesting. If they're the standard, like, little gold specs smart card, like the one I had up here, then yeah, you can probably read any one that hasn't got any kind of security on it. And if you're wicked elite, read ones that do have security on them. I also heard Blue has gone over to RFID, haven't they?
Yeah, they have. The older ones are
Java
Java cards.
cards. Okay, so they're... All right, I actually had a friend who did work with me. Yes?
I don't know enough about cars, but McDonald's has those new tap interfaces where you just tap your credit card and it reads it. What does that use, if you know?
I would assume RFID, just because if it's a magnetic stripe, it's going to have to go past a head. RFID, though, you just have to get nearby. So if it's tap, you could probably just do tap, have it pick up the impact via like a little microphone or a piezoelectric transducer or something, and then go, oh, they tapped something, read the card. And you could get location pretty easily with Piezo. MIT was doing some work with that, where you could have a desk that you could tap on various places and it would do various things. Had a projector, I think. Yep. Yes. Yeah, sure. Come on up. Anybody wants to take a look? Just don't steal anything, please. Please. We've got about 5 minutes if anybody wants to look at stuff, and then I'm going to have to shut down and get out. Thank you all.